Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Corporate Venturing Insider series. Today will be special. We have Lucia Sinapi-Thomas, head of Capgemini Ventures. Lucia, welcome, and thank you for taking the time with us today.
Hello, Nicolas.
Hello. If you don't mind starting maybe with your personal journey, how did you get into corporate venturing?
Well, actually, I didn't plan for that for sure. I started my career. I was a tax and business lawyer, and then I joined Capgemini, and I spent most of my career in the finance area, being group deputy CFO back in 2013. Before I moved to business, and that was actually a turning point towards moving into venturing, because I was leading a business called Business Platforms, which was a set of units delivering BPO services on the IT stack. So as diversified as a third-party administration for insurers, reference data in banking, or a customer center as a service, which was a technology platform. And what was very striking, what I could feel and touch in this business operational role, is how important IT systems are if, as a business, you want to launch new products and innovate and lead on a market. If you have legacy systems, for sure, it's a hindering factor. And naturally, that opened the way to absolutely identify, for instance, fintechs that were changing the game, in particular on the front end, and which were absolutely agile, and which replication, of course, with legacy system was difficult. So that was for me an awareness call on the importance of innovation, and innovation coming from startups. So you see the link with ventures, and that led me to create Capgemini Ventures, which is now live since 2019.
Very nice, thank you. So I'll start first with your background, because I always ask how someone's background could be an advantage, but also a source of bias. In this case, you have a strong background in finance, and you've been a CFO. How much of that is an advantage to head a CVC, and how much of that could maybe bias you, especially when we think about early stage ventures?
That's a good question. Actually, given the formula we have on the CVC, I'm protected from the bias of being formerly a CFO to some extent, because most of what we're doing is focusing on the business aspect of it, and we are delegating the management of the portfolio and the financial, to some extent, the VC standard due diligence. But what's important and what's an advantage in my journey, and in my having been deep in finance, is that first, there is no inhibition, right? And that's important because there is an element of risk, but you look at the factors that can turn the startup into a champion tomorrow. And so the quality of the team, the synergies with our business are important points, and working hand in hand with Isaïe, I'll tell you more in a moment, is absolutely critical in combining the criteria. So no, for me, it's a strength.
Yeah, and I can see you're the type of CFO I like, where you understand element of risk and what that means to grow a business. So that's very nice. One more thing which you mentioned is a feel and touch. You were close to understanding how companies, businesses, entrepreneurs need IT to make innovations, to do something new. And you were probably at the forefront of the fintech innovation, which now is more obvious than it was at the beginning. how much of being in Capgemini, being at the forefront of all these innovative endeavors, made it obvious you needed a CVC?
That's a good question, because it was not so obvious. Because Capgemini is not a traditional corporate. It is a services company, an IT and consulting DNA, a strong company that delivers services to a wide range of clients in a large spectrum of sectors, right? So when we look at startups and innovation, we have our own needs, because like any corporate, we are not immune from the need to transform, to accelerate on digital transformation, absolutely. But in parallel, we have all our clients' needs. And our DNA is to identify and integrate the best of breed solutions. We have full neutrality when it comes to technology, because we are not a software editor. We do integrate and combine across the range whatever makes sense and whatever works best for our clients. And in today's world, the traditional players do not suffice. Startups, because of new technologies, cloud, but also with the growing importance over the last 20 years of private capital, have benefited from record high funding, which is turning them into an absolutely critical source of innovation. All corporates know that, and this is why we're here to talk today, right? Yeah. How to take the best out of that open innovation, depending on whether you have a strong internal R&D, your approach will be different. In Capgemini, we are not developing our own products, so we don't have so much of that R&D specificity. On the reverse, we have the duty to identify on our clients are in demand for being helped to navigate the startup ecosystem, to select the best, and we help them qualify. On top of that, when they want to adopt at scale, all of a sudden, they are faced, of course, with the complexity of the legacy IT that you still need to handle, connect, interface, transform, renovate. And that's when we come into play again. So our role is evolving, but remains fundamentally the bridge for our clients between technology and business.
So let me challenge you, because you started by saying it was not obvious, but everything you explained makes it very obvious.
Yeah, why is, you're right, I didn't answer that. Because, today in Capgemini, you have around 350,000 talents, right? And most of them are techies. So if you were to tell the field that you're going to concentrate everything about startups, nobody would believe you, right? So the challenges in a group of techies is everybody can know, of course, and interact with startups, especially in a very buoyant environment. The question is, why do you need a CVC for? The CVC was particularly needed to better structure the approach, right? It was a lever for alignment, as well as for market intelligence.
Very nice. So that I like a lot. One thing you mentioned also is a DNA and serving. Perfect DNA to start a corporate VC, which is that you're thinking about serving entrepreneurs. Can you tell me a bit about how you leverage the DNA of Capgemini into your own corporate VC and how you have your processes to engage with entrepreneurs?
So Capgemini Ventures, in reality, covers three aspects. The corporate VC, will come back to that. The bulk of what we do in reality has to do with facilitating and helping business units of Capgemini partnering with selected startups. And partnering starts from helping them to source whenever needed, to qualification, and formalizing the collaboration legally, contractually, with the startups. For all this, we have I have a central team with an operational team out of India, but also a network of startup ecosystem leads in the various geographies embedded into the operations to help the business very closely. So indeed, we do facilitate for the business the link with startup ecosystem. It's not that obvious for such a large group used to work at industrial scale to collaborate on the market with startups. We only start Series A and following, but still, it's a challenge. And conversely, for startups, navigating the complexity of a large organization like Capgemini is a challenge too. So having a dedicated team that can do the go-between and also monitor the performance of the collaboration, be the voice of the startup to business, and conversely, proves to be very useful.
Can you double click on be the voice of the startup?
That's an important one, right? Because that's absolutely an important one. I can see that sometimes in groups, in multinational groups, everybody is under pressure, and we have a variety of priorities to deal with. So dedicating the appropriate bandwidth for startups is not obvious, even if we have the appropriate processes, the business sponsors, etc. So what works well and what could be improved is absolutely important to identify, because you always need to adapt along the way what the collaboration format. So being able to discuss in a very authentic way with the management team of the startup is for them, I believe, very important.
Very nice. And then I want to go back about this feel and touch of the innovations. You mentioned Capgemini can see new trends early because of what the IT could enable. Do you find that this corporate VC initiative helps you to see it even earlier? Because then you can see some of the startups starting something even before the IT tools have caught up.
You're right. So I'll start from the macro view. I strongly believe that the VC industry, given the firepower that it has, there is some read-through into where we call it where the money flows, right? When you look at the stats where investment go, definitely it does complement what market analysts take as a view, what we see in the field, and it's very interesting to cross these sources of the data. I realize that our business leaders are interested to have that additional source of information. So we should not neglect that because of the massive amounts of funding that this is now attracting. The second thing is that it's such a buoyant source of innovation that it's very difficult to spot the trends. Even if you have armies, you will never be able to replicate the coverage that the entire VC industry has in terms of analysts looking and portfolio managers discussing with entrepreneurs and doing their own selection. We cannot ignore that the VC industry plays a role of spotting they have criteria, they have experience, and it's very professional. So over time, when you look at how portfolio concentrates, you can say that they do play a role in nurturing the champions of tomorrow. So for us, for Capgemini and the likes, there is an element of risk in working with startups if they don't survive tomorrow. So ensuring that you do the right bets is also important for our client needs to know that our approach is not anecdotal. We need to having a demonstrated structured approach is important, and us working along VCs, adopting VC standards when we look at startups is also an insurance that we don't make stupid bets.
Okay, there is a lot of things I love about you've described, and there's a few golden nuggets, but I'll start with something you said, which is massive amount of information. And then you get into the problem of what is noise, what is signal. And you really want to give to your client the signal, not the noise. And then you talk about doing the right bet. And then the word I love is insurance. So I want you to first double click on this insurance concept.
Maybe it's not the proper term, because there is no guarantee at all. What matters is that you look at a topic globally. So let's look at, for instance, data, privacy. The kind of topics we of course look at. You can spot a startup in a country, but if then you don't take a more holistic view and you don't benchmark, you might make the wrong choice. So it's very important to have again a structured approach, and working with VCs is a way to win time, because their portfolio is grants us access to a qualified level of information on their startups. So for us, it allows us to leverage our impact and our access to that market intelligence of what are the trends that we should take care of. And when it comes to selecting an emerging solution, a promising startup solution, we combine our expert view with the VC standards in order to ensure, to some extent, to de-risk our choice.
De-risk is a very nice way to say it. So one thing that I like, which is very rarely mentioned, most CVCs will say they learn so much from entrepreneurs. But here you're adding something which is learning from and working with the VCs. And this is also a source of quality information. If you find good VCs that are also very good at analyzing the trends. Having a CVC, is it critical for Capgemini to work with VCs?
Actually, we made the choice to build and establish our CVC as a VC. So how is that possible? Yeah. It's so that was by design, something that was very important for me for many reasons. So our CVC is an hybrid formula. Why? We have partnered with an established VC called Isai, and in a formula which is very simple, we are the only LP of the compartment called Isai Cap Ventures. So Isai Cap Ventures has an investment envelope of 80 million, traditional term limited fund, regulated, self-standing, so totally autonomous from Capgemini. What makes it a little bit more original is that Capgemini Ventures has an active role in sourcing and in the pre-selection of the startups we want to invest into. When I say pre-selection, I mean, we look at the business fit for Capgemini, but when it comes to financial due diligence, etc., we rely on Isaí. So we split the roles. That's for the primo investments.
Yeah.
It works very well because we work hand in hand, including in the sourcing phase. And then for the ultimate decision, of course, it's the traditional investment committee of the fund. We're sitting in there, but the ultimate, is self-standing, so they can decide not to go if the due diligence doesn't lead to the proper results. Why is that important for us? First, because I've been able to delegate the portfolio management to professionals. For me, it was important to gain time to market, be operational immediately. It's a sanctuarized envelope as opposed to on-balance sheet envelope. From a governance standpoint, it's also very important for startuppers that there is a clear distinction between the strategic needs and the VC. We don't interfere. We are never at the board. We only take minority tickets, never more than 20% of a tour. We are followers. So very often CVCs are criticized of having hidden agendas. In our case, it's objectivized. So it makes it easier, and which is making it easy for us to be invited to co-invest with other VCs. So what do we bring? So for us, it grants us access to a wide array of VCs with whom we could co-invest. In doing so, we have access to dialogue with them and to their portfolio in a qualified way, again. And why are they interested? Because what we bring is smart money, okay, like many CVCs. And in our case, it's not only our internal needs, but we become, when we partner and we go to market with startups, a growth accelerator. So many startups, many European startups see us as a gateway to expansion, international expansion, in particular, go to the US, which we know for European startups is a must. Conversely, for US startups, they are particularly interested whenever they want to develop and enter the European market. So that's the way it works.
Very nice. And we are touching on what I think is most special about your design, this hybrid design. Many CVCs try to learn best practices from financial VCs. You decided to go, like you said, time to market. You take the best of Capgemini. You choose a financial VC you want to work, who already knows the best practices, and you combine. But you're very clear on who owns which best practices and value add. How did you get this idea? Because it's not common, and yet it feels so logical.
It's not common, and it's not that obvious neither. Why? Because you need to have utmost confidence on both sides. Let me explain why. For the VC, they to some extent delegate a slight element of their sovereignty, right? Because in the pre-selection we can be wrong. So of course, Isaí can veto, but if they keep vetoing, we don't deploy. So it's not a win-win. Conversely, for us, we are delegating the management of the portfolio after the primo investment. So it's a different formula from investing and making 100% decisions from day one to exit. The other thing is that, of course, we are sharing. The carry, all the remuneration is totally standard.
Yep.
Which means that you are giving away some of the value creation. So on both sides, there is an element of I would say, a give and take in the formula. What made it possible? I think the first is that Isaïe founder, Jean-David Chauboredon, spent 12 years in Capgemini.
Okay, so there is a link.
Time ago. So culturally, there was a fit and understanding of what works and what could work less. You should know that Jean-David was absolutely was not the best advocate of CVCs, which he could see struggling on some elements, etc., and mistakes that could be attributed to CVCs. So that was not easy at the start. When we discussed, we had no intent to build that. It was just recognizing on both sides the difficulties, the challenges, but the opportunities, that we came up with that hybrid formula, where at the end, I think what is critical is the level of trust that Isaïe and Jean-David Chauboredon had to put on us in the work together, because that formula can only work if we tightly work together and we respect, each other's point of view. At the end of the day, it's about investing at the crossroad of Capgemini business and strategic interest and fit and VC standards. So Isaïe keeps us honest, and conversely, he needs to rely on us on developing the startups, the go-to-market, so making the smart money reality. So it's indeed a trust deal.
I'm sure they're not keeping you honest, they're keeping you disciplined. I'm sure you would be honest without them. But what I like is you talked about sharing value creation, which is for me the definition of a win-win partnership. You're very clear about value creation and sharing together. I also like, and this is important, I think, in that design, which is not being an advocate of CVCs, which means being very conscious about why CVCs typically don't work or make mistakes or create frustrations. And maybe you can share about what it is that you knew you didn't want your CVC to be like. What was maybe top 1 or 2 things that you knew other CVCs were doing you didn't want to do?
Well, I'll start with what I knew I wanted to build, which was a CVC that was really focused on creating internal impact for Capgemini business. So that was my focus, and still is. So that notion of you invest whenever there is a collaboration in parallel is something very demanding, but that was my obsession, and that's exactly what my team is focusing on today. I think the risks in the CVCs have to do with the pace and the standards that are used by VCs that you can't translate into corporate processes. I take an example. If you try to use M&A processes to strike a deal and be that's mission impossible, I tell you. So especially in competitive markets, we'll see how the market evolves. But sometimes you had last year, you remember, a few weeks to make up your minds and be invited. And be invited is already a challenge because the market was very competitive. So it's difficult to replicate that with the traditional M&A approach. That's one example. There are many others, but I had, of course, made a tour of the market, discussed with many VCs, CVCs, and I indeed had spotted the few elements that could make it difficult. And what I had identified is that credibility and reputation is absolutely paramount.
It's everything.
In that space is everything. So you don't have, you don't have free bullets.
You don't have a second chance.
Exactly. You don't have a second chance. If you get burned because you don't deliver on your promise, you're not agile enough in your processes, in your etc. You don't get invited anymore. So the entire formula and the impact I want to make for Capgemini relies on the fact that we are fully part of the VC industry.
Very nice. And I think you hint at market conditions changing. You talk about delivering on promises. One of the implied promise of investing is to be able to continue following investments afterwards if the portfolio company delivers. And here your structure as a fund, clearly with some reserve in the fund, even as market conditions change, that helps deliver on the promise despite maybe the balance sheet of the mothership, whichever company it is, start to be shaken up by market conditions. So how do you think, so talking about fund structures, this is one big advantage. How are you thinking about next funds?
Okay, first, this fund is close to halfway, right? In the active investment period, we have 7 investments for the moment, so more to come. I would say what you point out is definitely one of the biggest mistakes that CVCs on balance sheet can make, right? Mm-hmm. Because we all know listed companies have the pressure of the quarter, the semester, the results, and when things get tougher, there is a high temptation to cut investments. And investment into startups still fall into investments. Yep. Definitely having this formula is sanctuarizing the full envelope. So that's comfort from that standpoint. I believe that we are not yet thinking about next funds because we're still active on that one. But I realize that it is a comfort. For the moment, it's proving pretty efficient. We'll see whether for next times we need to adapt the formula. But definitely the sanctuarized envelope, investment envelope, is a plus.
Very nice. I want to move into the investment itself. And I understand that this is in partnership, but you also mentioned you're part of the investment committee. So can you tell us about how you make your decision for the investment itself? Is it a big investment committee? Is it a small one? Are you part of it? And what do you think about in terms of investment criteria to invest?
So first, I'll start with the investment thesis, right, which you will not be surprised has to do with our business. So we look at only B2B startups, SaaS, PaaS, or IaaS. With the recent acquisition of Altran, engineering is also now in the scope. And obviously, sustainability falls into that global investment thesis. So the role of ventures is to facilitate the bridge with startup ecosystem. So we are having what we call venture dialogues with the business leaders, sectors, or offers, and ask them basically out of their priorities whether there are holes in the solutioning that startups could be fulfilling. So we're having that regularly, and that helps us shaping a little bit the demand in terms of what could be fit for purpose and prioritize a little bit areas that we would be looking at. Then comes the sourcing comes from wherever. Some come from the field, of course, you would expect. Some come from the VC industry. So we manage actively the pipe jointly with Isaïe. Then when we see, and we can strike collaborations with startups that have nothing, to do with raising funding. So Ventures is working well beyond the CVC scope. But when a startup we're working with is raising funding, naturally that comes into the investment pipeline. Conversely, we can also push startups that nobody knows. It's an opportunity to push to the field and raise awareness. So it works both ways. So then we have, I'm calling a pre-selection committee that is composed of group experts that are nominated for 1 year. So we have rotations to expose a maximum of our experts or leaders to that process, because it's also a way to engage them.
That's very nice.
We'll run through the pros, cons, including Isaïe does the analysis from a VC perspective. And we only decide to proceed if we find the proper anchorage, the proper business sponsor that we feel can deploy the joint go-to-market and the partnership part, right, to deliver the smart money. So that's, of course, when that's pre-existing, it's quicker, but it works at any stage of the collaboration.
Very nice. I have questions about what you said, but how about the investment committee? Who is in the investment?
Then, that's at Capgemini level. Then the investment committee of Isaïe works like any VC investment committee. You have Capgemini representatives, so obviously I'm sitting there. The CFO of the group is sitting there, as well as the head of M&A, and we have Isaïe representatives. But the leader of Isaïe, Jean-David Chamboredon, can absolutely, for instance, decide to veto or not to go, even if it is, in particular, if the due diligence has proven that something went wrong. It never happened, but it could, typically. So we have really two instances, one which is really focusing on business, and the other one which is VC standard.
Very nice. So two things I want to touch on, your experts rotation and the fact that because of the CVC, you're getting an influx of startups. Maybe you don't invest in them, but they could actually be good partners or maybe at some point customers of Capgemini. Is that side benefit already not strong enough to just justify having a CVC for a company like Capgemini?
It's indeed an interesting trend that because we have a CVC, we are visible from other VCs. When they have in portfolio a startup that they know could be of interest working with us, they reach out to us independently from any co-investment, funding round, etc. And that's interesting, and that matters because in reality there is a vested interest on both sides, right? And no conflict of interest at all. The fact that we can co-invest is only an additional lever, but in reality, what matters exactly, it's the cherry on the cake. What matters for VCs is the success of the startup they have in portfolio, and what Capgemini, from that standpoint, remains, has always been, and remains a wonderful channel to market for tech solutions, whatever they are. So that remains, and it's particularly relevant when it comes to startup.
Very nice. And the second point I want to touch is this experts rotation, which to me is like a genius move because you get someone from Capgemini to be exposed to the innovation ecosystem, grow their career and their understanding. At the same time, you get the experts you need to be able to do the sourcing and pre-selection. Why 1 year? And how do you choose them?
That's a good point, because actually some of them remain for more than 1 year.
Okay.
So it's honestly, it is a question of having sufficient representation of the various practices of the group, right? And the composition in reality also is variable, because whenever we have a specific topic, so take cyber for instance, we invite the cyber experts that have been involved in looking at the solution, even though they are not part of institutionally of that committee. So it is an evolving scope. What matters is, number one, that we get the right qualification from our own experts. Second, that we have the right level of engagement of the business teams to work with the startup moving forward. And third, that this pre-selection committee is a visible instance, and it's also important in terms of, I would say, recognition. Being part of this is also an interesting recognition internally.
Very nice. And let's move to the entrepreneurs and the value you plan to add and that you add. What it is that you provide to these 7 portfolio companies that you wouldn't provide if they were not your portfolio companies?
So definitely we have a specific follow-up with them. So we organize quarterly business review, collaboration review with the business team. And we identify what should be improved, what needs to be strengthened, etc., etc. Why is it valuable? I believe that it's also for them. They have their own roadmap, and their strategy evolves. For young companies, it's not a linear journey. So being able to exchange, and I take an example. In one that comes to my mind is they are developing their roadmap, their technology roadmap, and recently they told us, maybe we should prioritize on that package instead of this one. So what does it mean for us? We're helping them navigating internally towards the teams that are working on that solution package, and where the combination with this startup could make sense. So we have been reprioritizing the internal facilitation and go between the startup and the business teams. How could they do that without our help? Of course, it's feasible, but it's such a large organization, and it's the same for all corporates, right? Startups don't have the bandwidth. They don't have, the alliance teams that are as developed as the big players like Salesforce, Amazon, or SAP. So having a dedicated team that can do that with them is certainly valuable for them.
I really like the word alliance team, because in a way you're helping them and guiding them through all the, you mentioned earlier, armies of people. So helping them to know which teams could really help them. And I also like the fact you mentioned non-linear journey, which is true for any startups, but this is also what's so valuable for you to engage with them, because this non-linear journey is what makes it uncertain and where you can get golden nuggets yourself about where the trends are going. How do you capture that information about what they learn along the way so that you can help Capgemini prepare these new mega trends?
So I would distinguish between the solutions that we can jointly go to market today from Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 of innovation, because the approach would be different, right? So for the moment, the examples I gave you are the ones that we can actually work with. but we're also looking at more early stage solutions, even if our investment thesis starts Series A and following, on areas that we believe could complement our effort. I take two examples. We have launched Metaverse Lab that, of course, is working on immersive and Web3, or a Quantum Lab. So we start seeing there are some startups, obviously, in early stage on that front. It's interesting to look at them, interact with them, and see what's feasible there. But the bulk of what we do is true, has to do with solutions that are mature enough that we can work with to deliver services for our clients or for ourselves. And there, our experience recently is that they really need to be mature enough, because otherwise it's a challenge on both sides. It's a challenge that mature enough, and they need to deliver sufficient traction on the market for the collaboration to be particularly fruitful. Otherwise, there could be frustration on both sides, and that's important to anticipate, qualify, and adjust. So the latest minority investment we made was in a rather mature startup. We can afford that, and it's in cybersecurity. And especially in cybersecurity, you really need to work on more established and more mature solutions.
And I think it's back to your concept of alliance team, which is, it's not just about knowing which teams to engage with, but also when to do so. How much of that do you craft and fine-tune and learn over time, and how much of that is actually fairly obvious to know when is the right time to engage a particular startup with a particular team in Capgemini?
We keep learning. Point number one is that you can't say you have the silver bullet, and you'd better learn from your mistakes, and that's how you improve. It's a question of quality of the dialogue internally that helps you really spot their need. So when you have the understanding of what they're looking for, how they're working, you are more relevant in pushing solutions or helping them at the right moment. So definitely that's one side. The other thing is that you need to have the facts right on the startup side. So you need to really have authentic dialogue, and that's again where you can win time if you're working with the proper VC that knows the startups in portfolio, that's qualified information. Again, it's both interests to work with the proper set of data and making the decisions at the right time.
And this is hard. So that probably is part of a dedicated team versus experts rotation that we discussed. How do you build this team, and what type of profile are you looking to build that team that makes this interface, these connections?
That's an interesting question, especially in a group with a very diversified profile. So I've been trying to build my team, my central team, with profiles that come from the various horizons of the group. All of them are internal profiles. Of course, I onboard young talents, and we grow them. But I have somebody coming from, one of the team members come from engineering, ex-Altran, one from Sogeti, one Invent, one technology. So it's a fully diversified, an Indian colleague. It's definitely a fully diverse, an architect, a more CFO profile, also working on business case analysts. So it's a mixed, it's an hybrid team. That's very important because because it's also a question of network.
Yeah.
I told you at the start, internal networks are also important. Creating confidence, knowing what door to knock at, what door needs to be opened, is a way to win time. If you win time, you can respond more quickly to the startup, to the VC, and that's absolutely crucial.
And part of the internal network is not just which door to open, but more likely to be open because these people are already trusted by the internal teams.
Absolutely. So you demonstrate, of course, time after time, how serious, how you follow, how helpful it can be, and that's not charity business. People are busy. I'm sure in all corporates, everybody is very busy.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise. It's the same in Capgemini. So they will only engage if they see a benefit for their unit, for their clients. So that's the match you need to ensure. You need to ensure that the startup solution is really going to be embedded because it's useful for the service offer, for the projects on the long run. And what works better, I can tell you, you don't need to advertise. You can see that the best fit spreads. I mean,
success stories after success stories.
So exactly, the funnel of what they're jointly selling to clients is increasing quarter after quarter, and success is calling for success.
Very nice. One thing I wanted to double click, you mentioned earlier, is to be active in the VC industry. And you can be active and still be an outsider. I think here you find a way to be an insider. Can you share why you think it was so important in your design to be an insider?
To be honest, I'm not sure I had identified that need up front. The primary reason for which we designed it the way it is mainly to split the role, to sanctuarize, and have these virtuous VC approach while remaining focused on the business. It is moving, in the role and working with the VCs through the connections that I realized how rich that could be. And I think on both sides, because again, we are entertaining relations with VCs. We, for the moment, we didn't co-invest, for instance, but just because there is a natural fit between their portfolio and ours, and we are sure that in the future there could be joint investment possibilities, or that we are using some of their startups in portfolio for joint go-to-market. So it is a very rich number of possibilities of interactions.
This is really, really nice. If you think about the entrepreneurs who may be listening to this video, what would be the main reason for them to want to work with Capgemini Ventures and to get funding from you? What is the number one? You mentioned go to market and go to the US, but what would be your number one, your elevator pitch?
Well, my advice would be that they need to be convinced that their solution will sell with Capgemini clients. This is the magic formula. Then we can help. But the must is really that the solution is fitting the market needs of our clients that are tier one clients, and for which, of course, innovation matters, but adoption at scale matters too.
And here, maybe this is part of the superpower, which is you work with these tier ones. These tier ones don't typically work with very young companies, startups. Are you able to bridge that gap quicker?
We'd love to. Definitely, we'd love to. It's not that easy because it is for clients also a bet, especially the more business critical the solution, the more, of course, clients would tend to be risk adverse, right? So that's where our role becomes even more critical in helping in the selection, de-risking, etc. So we are playing the traditional role, but adapted to these solutions. For sure, when we can see that when we work with startups, we definitely make a difference because we have a sales machine which is absolutely powerful. And especially because when it's adopted, when you have the sufficient level of understanding, training of our own people, then you can deploy on many geographies. It becomes a real powerhouse. So it is not an easy journey. We shouldn't hide behind the finger because it comes with challenges. We are trying to help there. But when it works, I can tell you it's very powerful.
And you have a world-class sales team. So there is no doubt that this is a big advantage to any startup. I love how you were candid earlier, but you had not realized some of the parts about CVC, like the value of being an insider and so on. I want to push or leverage the fact you're so candid. Now you know what you know. Is there anything you would have done different at the beginning?
Yeah, maybe I would have asked for a larger envelope, investment envelope.
Well, it's not too late for Palm 2, I guess. When the
exactly.
comes. Very nice. I want to finish the last 2 minutes about what it is that you are most excited to invest next. And maybe this is also a chance for entrepreneurs who are listening to know what it is that you're looking for next.
Well, we are we have a large appetite because our portfolio is very wide, and we are the partner of digital transformation of our clients. You can imagine that this is an agenda that is absolutely wide and opening the way to a lot of possible opportunities. What we've been investing into a lot of customer front solutions, right? Data, of course, everything is about data. And the latest one I told you is in cybersecurity, a minority ticket into Devo. We'd love to find an investment into green IT or sustainable IT, because we definitely think that sustainability is important and technology has to play a role, and remaining, facilitating this in our own business would make sense, definitely. But we're also looking, as I said before, at solutions that are more forward-looking and less mature in the space of possibly Web3, or why not quantum. So if you look at the portfolio of Capgemini, our areas of interest are very wide, but you would not be surprised that most of them have to do with data and now with engineering.
Very nice. Lucia, thank you so much for your time. This was so nice of you to share so candidly. And I really appreciate that your design is very different from many, but hopefully the audience is opening their mind that there are many ways to do it. And your time to market and your ability to adopt best practices, acquire in a way best practices by working with a financial VC who have all the best practices already embedded, is a huge golden nugget. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you.